All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started because I think we have speakers from all of our organizations. So we have CARB here. Thank you guys for joining. We have South Coast AQMD. Thank you guys for joining. Unfortunately, the Port of LA folks did not confirm their attendance, so they're unable to join. And Fernando, I believe, from LADOT should be joining at some point. So this will also be recorded, as you guys know, so I will be planning on sharing this beyond the people just here. We appreciate you guys being here. So the information will be, relevant, and we'll share it among the people who we have previously corresponded with. Let me share my screen here. A little PowerPoint. Perfect. And can you guys see it? Perfect. Thank you guys for joining. So this is the community workshop on reporting truck idling. It's hosted by us, Breathe Southern California, along with our partners, California Air Resources Board, South Coast AQMD, and hopefully LADOT shows up. So Breathe Southern California is an environmental health nonprofit. We're a nonprofit or nonpartisan organization that promotes clean air and healthy lungs through education, research, technology, and advocacy. Our goal is to promote community health services through prevention, education, early diagnosis for low-income individuals suffering respiratory-related chronic conditions like asthma, lung disease, COPD, which is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. We also advocate for the implementation of clean transportation and energy technologies, improving air quality, and various environmental health causes. We received a grant from Toyota North America to do this work in the Wilmington, Carson, and West Long Beach communities. We received the grant from Toyota and have been working on it for a bit over a year now. As you guys are all aware that, these communities suffer disproportionate amounts of emissions from trucks, diesel particulate matter, and things of that nature, due to the fact that trucks go to and from the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. And as a result, people who live in those communities are actually subjected to higher rates of asthma and COPD. Our work on the grant is structured around the fact that we want to address the impacts of truck idling while working with the community to understand the issue in more detail and also what they would like to see from our work. So our strategy includes outreach to community members, truck drivers, public service messaging, placing signage and air sensors in the community, and drafting a community truck idling reduction plan. To date, we've surveyed 173 respondents who live in the study area, relating to air quality and truck idling. We've also surveyed 72 truck drivers to gauge their understanding on the impacts of truck idling. We've also utilized public service messaging to educate residents and drivers on their impacts. Most recently, we hosted a tour for staff of local, state, federal elected officials and agency staff to kind of show them the issue on the ground, kind of understand what these residents of these communities are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So our goals for today is to get a better understanding of what is truck idling, what is actually considered truck idling, how to report it, and how idling violations are enforced and by who. And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about what the current compliance rates are for violations. Following our presentation here, we'll have a Q&A with agency staff who will be able to answer your questions. And then lastly, I will post the link. It's actually at the end of the PowerPoint as well as in the chat box right now, about a survey that we're hosting to try to figure out where else we could put no idling signs, and also if you have any creative ideas on how to address idling in your community. So now I'll open it up to discussions. So I'm Tigran. I'm Breathe Southern California's Manager of Advocacy and Public Policy. And if the panelists would like to introduce themselves as well, just your name, the organization you are with, and your position title. Thanks.
Thanks, Pavan. Wonderful to be here tonight with you all. Thank you so much for putting this together, Tigran, and all the Breathe Southern California staff that have been involved in this. My name is Crystal Rule Chen. I work for the California Air Resources Board, and I am, among many other communities in the Southern California area, the Community Enforcement Liaison for CARB for Wilmington. So wonderful to be here and be working together on this issue together. It happens to be one of my, as many of you know, important projects that I work on in Wilmington and throughout Southern California. So thanks again.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pavan Rami. I am with the South Coast Air Quality Management District in the Compliance and Enforcement Department, and I work on, just like Crystal, on many of the AB 617 communities where we've heard consistently that trucks are of concern to community members, not only in Wilmington, but all the way down to San Bernardino and to LA. And so we've kind of, heard that and been working on different projects to address those concerns. And I'm going to be touching a bit on the regulations today, and I think we'll be tag teaming with Crystal. So happy to be here.
Ivan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah. Hi everyone. My name is Ivan Fonseca. I am the Public Policy and Communications Coordinator with Breathe Southern California, and Tigran is my director. So nice to meet everyone here.
And Victor, are you able to introduce yourself as well?
I think he may not be available right now.
Okay.
I can introduce him though. I actually work with Victor. He's the Assistant Deputy Executive Officer at South Coast AQMD of the Compliance and Enforcement Department.
Awesome. Thank you. So this is just the kind of rough agenda timeline of what we anticipate to discuss throughout the evening. So we'll get started with a definition of truck idling and current regulations, and then how to report truck idling. And then we'll go into enforcement strategy and compliance rates, and then we'll take questions. And then following that, just a reminder about the survey. So I'm going to turn it over to Pavan, Victor, and Crystal, because they're the experts.
Absolutely. So I think I'll probably kick it off. I have a couple slides, and then Crystal, feel free to jump in at any point. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, can you all see that? Great. So I'm going to be looking over here because my screen is over here, but feel free to step in at any point. So the truck idling regulation that South Coast AQMD enforces is actually a CARB regulation that specifically allows the air districts and other agencies such as police departments, so peace officers, LA Port Police, for example, they can all enforce this regulation. It's discreetly written into the regulation that other agencies and other peace officers can enforce it. So the purpose of it is to reduce public exposure to diesel particulate matter. And mainly this is done by the limiting of idling of diesel-fueled commercial vehicles. And the specific reg is Title 13, California Code of Regulations, Section 2485. And like I mentioned, it can be enforced by CARB, peace officers, and by local air districts. And then CARB will also at times create contracts with other agencies to be able to enforce on their behalf as well. So what is covered by this regulation? The specific types of trucks that are covered are those which are diesel fueled and they have a weight of at least 10,000 pounds. So you can imagine large trucks, right? Semi trucks, large coaches, not so much your smaller trucks, but many trucks fall within this category. And so they fall under the limits of the regulation. And these standards apply regardless of whether they're registered in the state or out of the state. And as you can imagine, trucking is often a trade that goes through many different states, right? And that doesn't really matter for the purpose of the regulation. It also applies to the diesel fueled auxiliary power systems, which are for essentially cabin comfort for when the driver might be sleeping in a sleeper berth on the truck. You can think of them kind of like smaller engines attached to the truck for the purpose of air conditioning or heating. And then what is not covered? So we talked about what is covered. What's not covered are personal vehicles like pickup trucks, motorhomes and trailers, non-diesel fueled trucks, so those that might be fueled by gasoline or natural gas, which is becoming more common. I've seen some natural gas trucks. And then off-road vehicles like tractors, cranes, or bulldozers. And then TRUs, or transportation refrigeration units. And those are the smaller engines that are built directly into the bed of the truck for the purpose of keeping food cold, food or other objects that other things that need to be kept at a certain temperature. And so those fall under a separate regulation, not covered under the truck idling reg. What are the restrictions? So the restrictions for these trucks that fall within the category are that if they do not have a clean idle sticker, which you can see an example of that on the right, then, sorry, my screen just blanked out, then they cannot idle for anywhere for more than 5 minutes. Even if they do have that sticker, and if they're within 100 feet of a restricted area, such as a school, residence, hotel, places where people gather, then they cannot idle for more than 5 minutes. And then the third part of that is if they have a diesel fueled auxiliary power system, that can also not be operated for more than 5 minutes when within 100 feet of a restricted area. And the idea of restricted area being that is where people are, and the main purpose is to reduce exposure to diesel particulate matter. So if a truck has a sticker, then it can idle as long as it's beyond 100 feet from a sensor receptor. If it's within 100 feet, then they cannot idle for more than 5 minutes. And that's how we regulate this requirement. There is an exception, and that is for queuing. Queuing refers to waiting to perform work in a line of vehicles that is repeatedly starting and stopping, and when shutting off the vehicle's engines is not possible. This is when a truck might be entering a job site, maybe picking up something or dropping something off, and so they're in a queue to enter the facility, whether it's a construction site or a warehouse, for example. And so they're kind of in the flow of traffic entering into the facility. That would be considered queuing. It does not count as queuing if the work location is not open yet. So let's say it's 5 a.m. and there is a long line of trucks that are outside of a construction site. It's not open yet, and they are all on. That is not considered queuing. It would only be considered queuing if they're in the process of their work. And regardless of this exception, queuing still cannot occur within 100 feet of any restricted area. I think we could probably touch on this a little bit later. This is on reporting complaints. But that is what I have for what the regulation is. I'm happy to expand on any points or let Crystal jump in.
Yeah, I could go ahead and jump in a little bit as well. Thanks, Pavan. It was nice to see your presentation. Yeah, I think just a couple of clarifications or extra nuances for everyone. When Pavan was saying, right, that we can enter into an agreement with another agency to go ahead and enforce this rule. Really what we have been able to do so far is to train other agencies. So that's, we've, for example, trained LAPD on enforcing the rule. We've also trained the port police. And so they are able to enforce the rule. Now, if a municipality would like to go above and beyond, for example, the city of Fullerton has gone above and beyond and went ahead and wrote into their own municipal code that parking enforcement could also enforce the regulations. That's entirely different. You can always go above and beyond the rules, but for the purposes of what we're able to do, we aren't able to come into an agreement, but we can train other agencies. So the law enforcement agencies and any area district that's interested in enforcing the rules. One thing that I thought might be interesting is to show you some outreach material that we have to truck drivers. Hopefully you can see it. And I think, so right, what Pavan was saying is where can't trucks idle for more than 5 minutes, like he said, within 100 feet of a restricted area, even with that certified clean idle sticker. It also includes senior care facilities, which oftentimes people don't realize is a sensitive receptor, or that one's there. Child care facilities, any kind of school, hospitals. So there is a lot more, like Pavan was saying, really anywhere where people are living. The other thing that I wanted to just point out briefly was that in addition to, so trucks can idle in some spaces for more than 5 minutes. And I think this is where we get into some trouble, because a lot of people see a truck idling. For example, I'll go, someplace and I see a pickup truck idling over by the lake near us, right? And I think, oh, why are they idling? But our rules don't actually cover that. Like Pavan said, it has to be 10,000 pounds or greater. So really think of all of those port trucks with the cargo containers on the back. That's for the most part what we are able to enforce on. But we have another code that actually applies to buses. So keep that in mind as well. That's school buses and other commercial buses. The school buses is California Code of Regulations 2485. And wait, I might be mixing these up here. So, sorry, 2480, and the commercial vehicle rule is 2485. So commercial vehicles also include your transit buses. So that's something that you can keep in mind as well. But so where can't they idle? And I think this is one of the parts that just really wanted to stress is, unfortunately, that exception to the rule and keeping people comfortable is real, right? So, buses are often idling. I see them idling near my home and I think, oh, I would really like to make sure that they're not idling for more than 5 minutes, but they're allowed to because they want to keep the bus colder in the summer times. So adverse weather condition, if they're using some kind of a device that needs powering, any kind of a power takeoff devices they're called, and that in traffic piece I think is important, and that gets into the queuing part. Some people are upset me too, of trucks idling while they're waiting at a railroad crossing, for example. It'd be nice for everyone to turn it off, especially when those really long trains are going by for 20 minutes, but technically they are in traffic in those spaces. Is it possible to turn off their vehicles? Maybe, maybe not, but for the purposes of our rule, they're in traffic for that. So it's something important to keep in mind. Another one is during our inspections or during mechanical failure. So those are sometimes when they can idle for more than 5 minutes. I'm showing you this slide. This is actually an excerpt from some of our outreach material. I put a little link here at the bottom to our website, bit.ly.com/ all caps CARB COES, all caps again. We have a couple of fact sheets there and some popular resources. I can pop that in the chat, or maybe Tigran can send an email. I don't know what's better. But just something to keep in mind is that we do have outreach material available if you can't remember all this, because it's a lot of information. I think that's it for what I wanted to add at this point. Pavan, does it spark any new ideas? Okay, good.
No new ideas, but I really like how it's laid out, pretty clear.
Thanks. We worked hard on that outreach. And actually these are excerpts from outreach materials that we hand out when we pull trucks over for idling, and any of our inspections, we give them this outreach material. It's in both, we have it both in English and in Spanish for our truck drivers to help remind them of the truck idling rules here in California. And this sign, I don't know, since I'm still sharing my screen, oh, there, I can see the stop share now. But since I'm still sharing the screen, this is the sign that should be up already in your neighborhoods. And I think this is going to dovetail right into Pavan's next segment on who to call and how to report idling in your neighborhood. But these are the signs that you should hopefully have if there are areas of idling concern, and we can talk about how to get more of those signs in other areas if they're not there already later on. Thanks.
Perfect, and thank you guys for that. If you guys just want to hop right into how to report idling, I think that'd be a great segue.
Sure. It's here. Let me just share a quick slide. It should be pretty easy to report idling. I'm a big believer in keeping things simple. So, South Coast AQMD takes a lot of different complaints, including truck idling complaints. And to submit a complaint to us, you can call us at 1-800-CUT-SMOG. You can submit it via our app. If you downloaded our South Coast AQMD app, you could submit there, or you could go online to our website and submit a complaint on our website. It's all effective, all three of them. Doesn't really matter which one you choose. It's whatever is most convenient for you. Monday to Friday, we have a live attendant during business hours who will answer your phone call. During off hours, we have a standby system, which essentially means that we have a supervising inspector who reviews all of the voicemails that are received and then assigns things out off hours. And then, so when it comes to truck idling, there are a couple things that are very helpful to our inspectors when we're conducting inspections, right? So, of course, location of the truck. If the truck is not idling right now, then when it is idling. So when do you see this truck idling? And is it, at a regular time, at a regular location? And if it is going on right now, then please mention that. because that will affect, if we can catch the truck idling, that's the goal of enforcing the regulation, right? And then if it's safe to do so, you can always get information like a logo or a license plate. But again, this goes back to safety. You don't need to feel the need to approach a truck or to go into traffic to get a logo, right? That's pretty much our job, is to identify the truck and the particular location that you're concerned about. And another thing that's very helpful is if you provide your contact information. We always keep that confidential. And so, it's helpful to us because our inspectors can follow up with you and get more information. Even if you don't include some of that information, maybe there's other information that is useful to the inspector. They are usually pretty familiar with the area and what's going on in that area. They're assigned regions, the inspectors who respond to these complaints. And so they're very familiar with maybe other truck idling complaints that have been received. And so you can always feel comfortable. If you feel comfortable too, you should provide your contact information, and our inspector will follow up with you to get more information and to do a good investigation. Right here, you can see an example of the slide of the picture that Crystal showed you earlier. And if you see at the bottom, it says call 1-800-CUT-SMOG to report violations. That's the same phone number as our complaint line. And so hopefully you've seen these signs in your community. Crystal and I were actually out in West Carson a couple months back, and we heard from a community member that these signs themselves led to some reduction, that they were being preventative. And I was pretty happy to hear that. So hopefully you've seen these signs in your community. We're still working on getting more installed where we can. And that's pretty much how you report a complaint to us.
Yeah, and that's really great, Pavan. It is just that simple. I've called the 1-800-CUT-SMOG on a number of occasions, and the inspectors have given me a call back to follow up. Hopefully, and what it does is every time you call in, whether or not they're able to get out there while the truck is idling, they are able to track it, right? And go out other times or on another day. And if it's, happening regularly, then we can start to address that, right? With more outreach. Some of the areas, there's habitual queuing at a certain location, maybe to get into a warehouse, right? So can we go have a conversation with the warehouse? It gives us just more information in general that our agencies are sharing with each other and trying to solve these problems at that level. What was I going to say also about the no idling signs is if you have, if you think about a parking sign, there's parking, you can park during these certain hours, 4 to 5. Well, that's a really short time window. You can park on this street from 9 to 5 and then no parking after that. That's something that is only enforceable really for that block, right? And so they put these signs on every single block. When we're putting up these signs, it serves as a reminder to the truck drivers, but we do not need the signs to enforce in an area. And I think that's a really important point because they are good. They're meant to be deterrents, but we do not need a sign. If we see someone idling, we can and often do write citations if it's illegally idling. So there doesn't need to be a sign there for that.
I will also add something that Crystal mentioned reminded me that, Crystal, you also do the same thing where we respond to both complaints, but we also conduct proactive sweeps of particular areas. And so if we see that we've received lots of complaints in an area, we'll conduct a sweep in that area of trucks. So it's not only responding to complaints, it can also be proactive inspections conducted by the agencies themselves as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a good primer for our next section. If you want, if you want us to dive into that, Tigran. I don't know if there are any questions now.
Well, I don't see any in the chat, and if there are, please put them in. But yeah, I think I was going to mention, Pavan's point just there. How often are these periodic inspections happening? And obviously, if a lot of complaints are coming in, I'm sure you guys are obviously being proactive. But do you guys go out once a month, once every few months? What is the timeline there normally?
So I can start with South Coast and our approach. So in each of the AB 617 communities, right now there is 6 of them. 5 of them have actions around truck idling. And so we're going quarterly within each of those communities to do sweeps. That would be outside of any complaints that were received. And I mean, it comes out like for example, in South LA, East LA, and Southeast LA, they're all kind of next to each other, these communities, right? So we're going out in the LA area regularly, right? In Wilmington, Carson, West Long Beach, we're going out quarterly, and then if we receive any complaints, we'll go out for those as well.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so I think we can just jump into that next section about compliance rates.
I actually see a hand raised.
Oh. Here, Marilyn, I'm going to unmute you.
I just wanted to say that the chat says it's disabled, but I was going to ask, do you ever give warnings prior? So you see someone idling, do you just go up and say, okay, here's your ticket? Or do you ever warn them first? How are they notified as the drivers? How are they notified about not? I know that's a big issue in Wilmington, people idling these big 18-wheelers in people's neighborhoods, blocking the driveways. It's been a nightmare. So I'm just curious.
So I can start with how we approach it. We're not generally giving warnings to trucks if they're observed idling more than 5 minutes. We issue a violation for it. Now, if they've idled for 4 minutes and they shut the engine off, then they're compliant with the reg while we were there, right? And sometimes that will happen because many of our inspectors have marked vehicles. And so if they drive up, are driving through a neighborhood and a truck sees the logo from South Coast AQMD, maybe they'll turn the truck off. So it's not like we are issuing violations every time we go out, but if we do observe one, we issue.
And I believe that's the same for CARB as well. Our inspectors, what we've noticed, and Paul and I were just talking about this today, right, is that sometimes our inspectors will see a whole line of trucks idling, and but once we've issued that first citation, everybody turns their engine off once we're there and they notice us. So I think that's, unfortunately, we do have to have that 5-minute rule and observe it. But other than that, we do issue citations to the best of my knowledge when it's happening. I can't speak for LAPD and Port Police. They may enforce it differently.
Thank you.
Perfect. And Marilyn, I'm just going to keep you. If you want to ask another question, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll just unmute you again. But now we can go into, I guess, the next section, which is enforcement strategy and compliance rates. Perfect. And I'll leave it up to Crystal and Pavan to see who wants to get started.
Well, I think we talked about me diving in first. So do you want me to go ahead, Pavan? Okay. Yeah, so enforcement strategy. I think just as you can tell, South Coast has been leading the discussion tonight. So we enforce this regulation throughout the entire state. And we do have limited resources. So we're so grateful when an air district can assist. That doesn't mean that we're not out enforcing the regulations as well. We tend to do actually full inspections in areas of the truck, not only idling. Unfortunately, South Coast is only authorized to do the idling inspections, but so we're able to do inspections for smoke opacity standards, for tampering with the vehicles. We really can do more complete inspections when we go out and do our inspections in the areas. That being said, we've conducted quite a few idling inspections that is also driven by community input, as well as, like Pavan said, our inspectors are very familiar with these areas. We're down at the ports a lot, and we're at the rail yards a lot. So our inspectors do know where a lot of these trucks are. But that being said, anytime we can get more information to give to our field enforcement, we certainly do that. And a lot of times that's at meetings like this. We also have other community meetings that we attend regularly where we get additional information. And obviously also through our partnership with South Coast. Maybe I'll just share my screen one more time. So just wanted to show you the idling compliance rates for CARB. So Pavan will discuss them for South Coast, but like he said, we are going out at least quarterly. Sometimes it's every month, sometimes it's multiple times every month. It really depends on, how we have our inspectors are deployed all over the state. So really it's about making sure that we're getting out as frequently as we can and going to the areas where there are idling concerns. We have a tool, and maybe this is actually the thing that I'll show you next, called the Enforcement Data Visualization System, where we track all of our inspections, and we can then see some of our compliance rates from them. So we have really high compliance in general. We've done over 1,000 idling inspections in the past 6 years. This isn't including 2022 data, and that gives us a compliance rate of 94%. But compliance rate is simply that rate for those vehicles that we have seen and inspected. So always put an asterisk next to this. We know there's other idling vehicles out there that we don't know where they are, right? So that's why it's really important to have community input on this. The compliance rate is pretty similar. We actually have inspected in the last 6 years over 41,000 trucks statewide for idling. And that tracks, it's all pretty similar in the same area. For the compliance rate for 2021 in Wilmington was 93%, and we inspected 625 trucks. Now, that compliance rate is similar also for 2020. I looked at that, but interestingly enough, the statewide average last year was higher, when we found 97% compliance for over 7,000 trucks. So yeah, there's definitely a little difference, right, in between Wilmington and others, and that's because we've gotten really good community input and insight into where we should be enforcing our regulation in Wilmington. So thanks to all the community members for helping us out with that. before I let Pavan take the floor, I'm going to show you one more thing, if that's okay. I did want to show you how you can look more closely at our data. This is only the idling data that I shared with you, but we have a tool on our website, and I'll put the link in the chat as well. It's called our Enforcement Data Visualization System, and you can see really what regulations we're enforcing for vehicles and other regulations we're enforcing in your area. We have a little tutorial if you want to learn how to use the Enforcement Data Visualization System, EDVS we call it, because it's a mouthful otherwise. But otherwise, you can just jump right in to the system. It's nice because under options, we actually have your community. It happens to be one of our AB 617 communities. Part of the Wilmington, West Long Beach, Carson community. So here you can check on inspections or any settlements that we've had in your area. You can look up any program. So for example, we're going to have not just heavy duty vehicle programs that we enforce, but also fuels, railroad, and marine. We're going to get a lot of marine here because you guys have a port. So you can see those regulations as well. And then we have additional programs that you can look into our enforcement of in your area. And this really shows you on the map where we've been doing our enforcement. And when you have the closer you get to the map, the more you zoom in, the more you can really drill down and see where the enforcement's happened. You can look at different years, back to 2015. You can look at different categories. These are all of our regulations. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten around to putting a description of what all these different regulations are, but certainly idling is an obvious one. Smoke opacity, HDVIP, is another really important one. That's, a lot when you see smoke coming out of a truck, that typically means it's exceeding our smoke opacity standard of 5%. And then when you click on the dot, you can see the inspection results of what we've done enforcement on and what the compliance looks like for it. So I just wanted to give you this as an option for tracking where we're doing all of our inspections for the future. And I'll put that in the chat. Pavan, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit hard for me to follow that nice tool. We don't have such a nice tool for enforcement data visualization. We have a tool for stationary source facilities, and I think maybe some background is helpful here. But South Coast Air Quality Management District is the local agency, and we're tasked mainly with regulating the stationary sources. So think of places that don't really move, like refineries, down to auto body shops or dry cleaners, right? And everything in between. Whereas CARB regulates some stationary sources, but they also have a lot of regulations that apply to mobile sources. And as a direct result of AB 617 and what we heard again and again in the community, we really beefed up our approach on mobile sources where we could, for example, with truck idling. And so while we don't have as many inspections as what Crystal's team has done, we've inspected across the South Coast Air Basin, mainly with a focus on the transportation hubs, of course, right? We've inspected about 1,800 trucks since 2018, and 1,400 of those were within AB 617 communities, and those resulted in about 27 notices of violation. And as you may have noticed in Crystal's data, the the bar to issue a violation can be quite high. You know, on CARB's tool, you'll see that the compliance rates are fairly high, and that's because of things like an inspector driving up and maybe the driver shuts engine off, or maybe it's something simpler like they're not within 100 feet of a center receptor, right? And so a truck might be idling for 2 hours, but if they're not within 100 feet of a center receptor and they do have a clean idle sticker, which is a certification of the engine and how much it pollutes, they're not in violation of the regulation. So I hope that context is helpful. We don't receive a very significant amount of idling complaints from the community, but we would be happy to hear if there is idling going on, because then we can follow up on it. So please do not hesitate to call us ever, right? If you're not sure whether the truck falls within the reg, we can figure that out, right? Don't hesitate to call, and I'll do a plug. Don't hesitate to call for other air quality issues as well. You know, we regulate trucks, truck idling, but we also regulate odors and dust and all kinds of things. So all kinds of air pollution concerns, right? So I see something in the chat. Is that, oh, that was you, Crystal. Cool.
That's me. And definitely don't downplay that fine tool, Pavan. You guys have made great leaps in it lately. I find it really helpful.
Yeah, I'll be happy to put a link in the chat. This is a tool that you can use to see stationary sources. So you wouldn't see trucks, but let's say there is a factory that releases steam in your community and you're curious about what it is, it's probably on here. And if it's not, you can call us, you know? But I'll put a link in the chat for that.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else will as well. You know, I had one initial question, and then I'll open it up if anyone else has some questions. So we talked a little bit about you know, other agencies enforcing or inspecting trucks like LAPD or the Port Police. You know, after they're trained, do they check back in? Do you guys, is there like a reporting system with them that they kind of share information with you on the numbers that maybe they have enforced or any violations they've issued? What's that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Pavan, if they've been checking in with you, but they tend not to check in with us. It's South Coast and CARB, I think, doing the lion's share of the enforcement. Honestly, our law enforcement folks in the city of LA are stretched pretty thin, but they are able to write their own citations. It doesn't have to go through our citations database or anything. So we do would like to gather up those data, but we really just started this program this year. The signs were really installed just earlier this year. So that's certainly something that we'd love to check in with them and see what their enforcement experience has been, but we haven't yet.
I'm pretty much the same as what Crystal said. I have not had any contact with Port Police, so.
Good to know. Thank you.
Good, and it's nice to see you, Chris. I was all excited. Chris Chavez here. Marilyn, I'll put in the chat as well my email address.
Terrific.
Happy to talk with you and Valerie further about you know, anything where we can help out or give some additional information. We've been learning a lot as well on this journey, and can't go into all the details tonight, but would love to carry on the conversations with you.
Awesome. And Chris, I think you are able to unmute if you have a question.
Chris Chavez with Coalition for Clean Air, resident of West Long Beach. One thing, and my apologies, I may have missed this earlier. I think that's certainly important to make sure it's discussed and also figure out how to do this more safely. Is about in terms of reporting trucks about the license plate. You going with the front license plate rather than the back license plate, because otherwise you're just getting the license plate for the trailer. I think one thing. Just a couple days ago, I was on the road and saw a truck billowing out smog or pollution, but it wasn't safe enough to turn around and take a picture of the license plate. So, what options, or is there anything that CARB is currently considering and looking at, kind of making a safer option, be able to report highly polluting vehicles like that?
Great question, Chris. I don't know of any new technologies that we're thinking of. I too have tried to do that in the past, take that picture of that front license plate. As you can report the smoking trucks directly to us. Even if you can't get the license plate, it's tricky, right? If you can't get the license plate, it's really hard for us to be able to track down that truck because it's moving. So I hear what you're saying. I will say I'm hopeful that the heavy duty inspection and maintenance program that's going to be starting up next year is going to be really helpful for that, curbing those smoking vehicles as much as possible. Basically, for those of you that aren't familiar with that program, it's basically smog check for trucks. So, it will be incorporating, smoke opacity and other maintenance information into the system. And making sure that it's being reported and tracked, and if those vehicles are pulled over, then then they'll be able to really enforce on those vehicles. But Chris, I hear what you're saying. I wish I knew of a safer way, and you definitely shouldn't take a picture of the license plate unless it's safe. It's really important just to be safe first.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, and you're right in the sense of the truck smog check program, the maintenance and inspection program is going to be very important to that regard. So thank you for that information and additional context.
Awesome. Any other questions? And if not, we can wrap up. I'm not seeing any other questions. So, I wanted to thank everyone for joining. Crystal, Pavan, incredibly thankful for your guys' time and knowledge. I know I learned a lot today, and I look forward to sharing this knowledge with other people within the community and beyond. Again, thank you for your time. If anyone has any other questions, you can not only reach out to Crystal and Pavan, but I'm going to also put my email in the chat. And if you have any other further questions, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Oh, hey, anyways, thanks everyone. It was really nice meeting you, Marilyn. Nice seeing you, Chris, hearing your voice. It's been a while, and thanks so much for inviting us, and hopefully we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.